Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Illuminating Insights. I'm joined today by my friend Sanjiv Augustine. Sanjiv is the founder and CEO of Lightspeed LLC and the Agile Leadership Academy. Sanjiv is an entrepreneur, industry leading Agile and lean expert, author, speaker, management consultant, and trainer. With over 30 years in the industry, Sanjiv has served as a trusted advisor to executives in management at leading firms, including Capital One, the Capital Group, CNBC Comcast, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, General Dynamics, HCA Healthcare, Huntington Bank, The Motley Fool, National Geographic, Nationwide Insurance, Royal Bank of Canada, Samsung, and Walmart. Sanjeev is the author of the books From PMO to VMO, Managing for Value Delivery, Managing Agile Projects, Scaling Agile, a Lean Jumpstart, as well as several publications including Transitioning to Agile Project Management, the Lean Agile PMO, Using Lean Thinking to Accelerate Agile Project Delivery, and Transformational Leadership for Business Agility. Sanjeev, I am so excited you can be here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Trisha, and it's always a pleasure to connect with you.
Oh, it's always so fun when we get to run into each other at all of the industry events that we end up at the same time.
Yes, and we had the great privilege of being together with you last week. So
Yes, yes, I know. And we get to be together again here in a couple of weeks at the next conference.
there you go.
So you have worked with so many agencies and organizations. I know that with being where you're located out on the East Coast, you often also run into several government contacts as well and government clients. What are some of the trends that you're seeing as we look to just help change organizations and really work towards value delivery in different organizations?
Yeah, so we certainly, what month is this? September, almost October 2024. We live in very interesting times. There is an amazing amount of turbulence both in our companies, in our larger world, in the macroeconomic environment. And one of the things that we have to remember, at least we as Agilists always have to remember, that ultimately it's about the people and creating a North Star vision for those folks and helping our clients and our companies and organizations stay true to that North Star vision. So I know we want to get into a discussion about value and what are we seeing out in the industry. I think organizations, and particular leaders, I work a lot with executives, are on one hand really struggling to keep up with all the changes, right? So there are market changes. We just heard an interest rate cut from the Federal Reserve. There's AI, generative AI, being sort of creating a disruption in the industry and how we work. And so our leaders are now, I won't say overwhelmed, but they're taxed. So what I'm seeing is that leaders and organizations are taxed almost to the limit and sometimes beyond the limit. The other things that I'm seeing is that there are older industrial management principles that have, I think, taken their course. Companies that have been run in an older way are struggling and have either gone out of a business or about to go out of business. So there is, to me, the beginnings of a new dawn. And I know there will always be issues, there will always be challenges, but for those of us who've been in the agile space and who are building on a foundation of lean and are now moving that towards artificial intelligence and responsible AI, I believe in the promise, and I think many of our fellow leaders on the other side of the table in companies that are leading their organization, they see a few key things. They see the promise of AI, they see a potential resurgence in the economy, and they see the opportunity to build on their foundation of agile teams and enterprise agility.
That is such a great way of looking at things. And, AI is going to be such a big part of what we're doing in the future. Well, you're right, it has to be responsible. So, what would you tell a leader as they're looking at AI? Because I know I talk with a lot of leaders myself, and AI is either the next best thing and we can't get enough of it, or it's like, we're not so sure about that. So, what would you say to leaders that are looking at AI?
With great power comes great responsibility. I think this is a Spider-Man
Yeah.
quote.
Either
So,
Spider-Man or Spock. I can't remember
yeah.
which.
Yeah, so that's yeah, joking aside and totally not being facetious at all. It is potentially a very dangerous technology. You see some of the things that are happening. The evolution is hyper evolution. It's going to be omni-use. AI technologies are going to be omni-use. They're going to be autonomous, where we can expect AI agents and AI chatbots to be part of our teams operating autonomously with very little control and perhaps guardrails that we're able to exert over them. And so, what I advise leaders and what I think leaders need to think about in terms of responsibly integrating AI is to learn quickly and raise their own skills very, very, very rapidly so that all of us can be inside the AI tent looking out, not outside looking in. Because if we're outside looking in, we're going to be left out. This thing is moving so fast and changes are being made literally every day, not even every week or every month. And so our answer to doing that in a very structured and disciplined way is through what we call an agile value management office that is enabled by AI methods. And there are three key aspects, right? Looking at our portfolio of work, we need to make sure that the work is organized and prioritized and anchored to customer needs and business outcomes through lean portfolio management. And that's, I wouldn't say standard, but that's understood. We've been working in that space, prioritize our portfolio, make sure we're working on outcomes, delivering value. The second aspect of that agile VMO enabled by by AI methods is what we call adaptive governance. We need to make sure, much more so in this AI era, that we're bringing our organizational stakeholders into the conversation early and often. So we have an acronym CARLA, CARLA, and that stands for compliance, audit, risk, legal, and architecture. When many of our clients are larger organizations with enterprise architecture, so they need to become part of that conversation as well. So we need to bring in those enterprise stakeholders from CARLA, compliance, audits, risk, legal, and architecture early and often, work with them and work with them within a framework of adaptive governance. Third, last but not least, is responsible AI. So we need to understand that as we're bringing our portfolio forward, as we're putting in those regulating factors, how do we now bring in this new thing, whether it's through ML ops, machine learning operations, extending our existing DevOps capability to machine learning operations, ML ops, and then understanding that as we bring this new technology in and roll it out across our organizations, that it can have great power, but also great threat and can create great damage. So one of the things that you'll hear some of our clients talk about is this notion of a red team and a blue team. This comes from cybersecurity, where the red team folks will look at all the threats and vulnerabilities and potential bad actor issues with AI, including something as simple as creating the wrong results through hallucination, to something maybe more insidious as something under the covers that's not detectable. And so that's our red team. And in parallel, we'll have a blue team that'll take all the positive aspects and say, okay, here's what we can create. We can create a better developer experience. We can create a better team member experience. We can automate some of these repetitive tasks. We can now use AI for good, if you will. But we also need to be always keeping a vigilant eye on the threat of AI, even as we're doing that. So those three things are how we're seeing that move forward. So lean portfolio management, adaptive governance, and responsible AI.
Oh, I think that's a really good triad of ways to bring it forward. And it really takes away the myth of um, Agile doesn't have structure. Because Agile, those of us that have been in this agility world for so long, we know that there is structure there and that there has to be. But by really reinforcing the fact that there's a governance model and that, we have to have those different teams that look at things, it brings back the idea that there is structure there and that there is governance there and that we all do this within those boundaries because we have to have those boundaries to keep everybody safe,
Mhm. Yes, absolutely.
which is very, very important. How are you seeing within those executives, how are you seeing them respond to these ideas that this is something that we can do and we can do it well? We just have to put some thought into it so that we do it with intention.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I also want to cover mm, maybe a little bit related to culture, organizational culture, and of course,
Yeah.
culture is driven by leadership. So we have had the exceptional good fortune to have worked with some amazing clients and amazing leaders within those client organizations. And every single one of those leaders, the ones who are successful over the long term, the ones whose organizations are successful over the long term, are successful because they take what I call the art of the long view. They're always looking at the far horizon. They're not getting sort of paranoid or getting too excited by the AI hype cycle right now, because AI is definitely in that hype cycle, at least generative AI is. And they are taking it with a sort of calculated, okay, here's a technology, we're going to figure this out. And so our executives, the executives that we work with, they're saying, we need to take the art of the long view. How will this impact our organizations? How will it impact our people, right? And our technologies. And so some of them who are in more conservative, more regulated industries are putting a little bit of an icebox around it and saying, yes, we like this idea of the AI technologies, but we can't really introduce them at scale within our organizations because of our regulatory needs, particularly in government agencies and all that. So until we can recreate those models in our own controlled environment, we're not going to touch it, but we're going to keep aware of it. So that's a little bit of a distance. Others are like, we're more private sector. We can move quickly into product and maybe generate some AI products ourselves. They're adopting it whole hog, but of course doing it in a calibrated, careful way, but are moving forward quickly. But for us, the customers that we work with, all of them are taking it carefully and mindfully, but always within the art of the long view, always looking at the far horizon.
And that's just a really good idea because we can't just plan for today or a month from now or even a year from now. You
Yeah,
know, we
yeah,
have to keep that, 5, 10 year horizon in mind
right,
because even though we're not exactly sure what's going to happen there, that's the journey that we have to get to.
right. And we may not be there,
Yeah,
but somebody else in our organization is going to have to take that forward.
exactly, exactly. So from a cultural perspective, what are you seeing?
So the culture that we've always found to be successful is one that is anchored in people values. Can we treat our people well? Can we create an environment where people are accountable for the work they do, they're disciplined for the work they do, and therefore they can be autonomous in as a team. So so the greatest leaders that we've worked with, the folks that we've seen, and certainly your company as well, we've all seen that the leaders that are successful over the long term, by our definition of success, which is happy people, profitable growth, and long-term viability. These are cultures that give people the respect. Right, it's a lean principle, if you will. The respect for people is like a foundational aspect of lean, and then are always continuously improving. So at a macro level, that's what I believe that a culture should be about, built on the pillars of lean, respect for people, continuous improvement, and we're all looking at getting better. We're always looking at improving, whether it's individually within a team or an organization, but fundamentally, we're always doing it with a very high degree of respect for people.
And that follows in with so much of the research we ourselves have done,
Yeah,
those data points of flow, value, quality, and
yeah,
happiness.
yeah,
You can't have any of it if your
yeah.
people aren't happy.
There you go.
So, this falls exactly in line. So, if you had one thing that you could tell someone listening to this podcast, what would it be?
That's a tough one because there's so many things going on right now. But perhaps the one thing that I would say is that comes from a personal belief. I'm a cautious optimist. So I really believe, despite everything that's going on today, everything that we have to deal with, especially the higher up in the organization you are, the more challenge you have to deal. I really believe that tomorrow will be better than today. Next year will be better than this year. And so I do believe in a positive future. And I do believe that as we pass the torch from our generation, because we're going to have to do that, at least for myself, within the next 10 years, the next 15 years, to a new generation that is, chomping at the bit to take over, we need to give them that sense of optimism as well, while also telling, warning them about all the stuff that can be wrong and being mindful of it. So be positive of the future, but be also mindful as you move forward.
I love that. I love that. Now, you've taken the time that a lot of us think about it, but you've actually taken the time to write a book about VMOs. Tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about that. What will we find when we get your book?
All right. So I do want to mention that I've written three books, the first one in 2005.
That's right.
So
That's right.
the first one was Managing Agile Projects, and I'll build up to to answering your question specifically. The first one was Managing Agile Projects, and that was sort of with the ebullience of the whole Agile movement. Everything was growing. It's like, okay, we need to figure out how to get a handle on the teams. How do we manage these projects? How do we manage the Agile team? So that was more team focused. Then mirroring the journey of Agile maturity as Agile went widespread across the world and went into enterprises, and enterprises had to figure out how to deal with these Agile projects and Agile teams and strange Agile people, if you will. I fell back on the lean principles, right? We said Agile is all about a lean foundation. So my second book was Scaling Agile, a Lean Jumpstart. And it was all about flow and value and continuous improvement and Kaizen and Kaikaku and all these lean things. So that was scaling Agile. And then again, 15 years or so into the Agile journey, a lot of middle managers were sort of being left out of the equation. And we, within our organizations, within our client organizations, were finding that executives were getting it. They were able to set strategy in a correct way. Teams were getting it, but that middle layer of management was not actually being considered. And what we know is that 80%, close to 80, or maybe it's 90% of transformation efforts succeed when they're led by middle management. And so we wrote this book, From PMO to VMO, from program management or project management office to value management office. But it's all about making sure that at that middle layer, everyone can be focused on value management. And so then we can make that connection between strategy and execution. And it's not just for PMOs. You could replace the word PMO with Agile Center of Excellence or Lean Agile Center of Excellence, or LACE, from COE to VMO or LACE to VMO. And it is all about moving from a project mindset to a product mindset, moving from outputs to outcomes, and moving from a insular sort of narrow definition of value to a broader organizational definition of value based on business outcomes. So that's the book. It's called PMO to VMO, Managing for Value Delivery.
And that's such an important conversation that so many of us are having now. I mean, we've reflected on that middle management layer often. I've heard it termed the frozen middle so many times because, we've done it, as you said, a fantastic job of transforming teams, transforming executives, but that layer in the middle is so key to organizational success. So, and the whole outputs to outcome conversation, I have that on such a regular basis. Um, because we really need to understand, how do we actually take the work that we're doing and tie it to the strategy of an organization. So such an important conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to write it down.
No
It's
worries.
such a very, very important thing to know. So thank you, Sanjeev, so much for taking time today to have a conversation with me and to share your thoughts with our audience. What final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Keep hope alive.
And what does that mean?
That just means let's move forward with a positive mindset.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Sanjeev, for taking time with us. And thank you all for listening to this
Thank you, Trisha.
episode
Appreciate
of
it.
Illuminating Insights. Have a wonderful day.
Take care.